You're listening to the Sisters in Loss podcast, a faith-based grief and loss podcast for Black women, where you will hear stories of miscarriage, infant loss, stillbirth, and infertility to learn there is a testimony in tragedy. You will learn how to heal, gain clarity, find hope and peace, and turn your pain into your purpose after loss. I'm your host, Erica M. McAfee. Thank you so much, Dee, for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. It's been a long time coming. This has been on my heart.
Awesome. So I'd like to begin with you sharing a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Yes. So my name is Dadriaunna Hayes, and my 9-to-5 is actually a project manager for a nonprofit which focuses on educational technology for students across the country. And what I do on the side, my side hustle is blogging, as well as just really encouraging moms, angel moms who have experienced loss as a millennial to use their voice and advocate for their right to birth.
So I would love for you to go ahead and share with us your loss story and journey.
Of course, thank you so much for allowing the space for me to be able to do this. So my loss journey actually began on April 11th of last year. I was actually doing an Instagram live Bible study, and I was focusing on God's timing. And at the end of my Instagram live, I started having preterm contractions. And at the time, I really thought that they were like Braxton Hicks because I was roughly 23 weeks. And so I just thought in my head that, hey, this is a level of pain that, I should be expecting. It's fine. My husband came home and I told him that I was, having some really excruciating cramps, but like it's nothing that I couldn't handle. The whole trope about being a strong Black woman. I thought that this was the pain that, motherhood is supposed to endure. And so he was like, no, we're going to go ahead and call the doctor. We called my doctor, who said, come right on in. The entire time that we're going to the hospital, I'm not thinking anything horrible or negative is happening. Like I literally have no worry in my mind or heart. Fast forward, we get to the hospital and they actually informed me that I am dilating at 2 centimeters. And I'm like, wait a minute, what does that even mean? Like trying to wrap my mind around it. And they were like, you're going to go into delivery. Unfortunately, the doctors and hospital that I was actually going to for my primary care, they had not fully built out a NICU center or a labor and delivery center. And so I recall a doctor coming in and saying, yeah, you're going to lose your son. There's nothing we can do for you here. And this was like the middle of the night. And it just was like really discouraging and frustrating. And then one nurse, and she is literally an angel, and I never got to get her name. She pulled my husband to the side and said, hey, you all are going to have to advocate for yourselves to be transferred to another hospital because they're not going to transfer you by themselves, which was really astonishing for me. But I was glad that somebody could be there to like at least inform us of the process. So we quickly got transferred to another hospital, of which I met with another doctor who informed me that they would perform a cerclage procedure to hold the baby in for at least another week until they could inject me with steroids to make sure that the baby could develop properly enough for me to potentially have a premature son. And so we went through the cerclage procedure, which was one of the most traumatic experiences that I had ever gone through. I had a really rough epidural experience, which left me extremely traumatized. But needless to say, the cerclage was successful. The next night, we are just laying in hospital bed. I'm recovering. My husband and I never forget, we were watching Game of Thrones. And I remember waking up in the middle of the night and I didn't feel well. And so I told the nurse, I was like, hey, can you put me back on the monitor so that I can hear my son's heartbeat through the night? Like that is going to be something really important to me. And the nurse said that she had actually gotten the instructions that she couldn't put me back on the monitor and that I was going to be fine. The procedure was fine, that there should be nothing wrong with me. We woke up the next morning. The doctor came to check on me. He checked for a heartbeat. And unfortunately, we were told that our son had actually passed overnight. And I just remember just hearing like echoes in my brain of what he said, like over and over again, and like feeling like the entire room was closing in on me. And then I could hear him through those echoes saying, and we also have to deliver like quickly. And I am just like flustered at this point, confused. I can't think straight. I'm completely overwhelmed. And I couldn't really totally understand why exactly we needed to immediately deliver. So I was induced and put into a room to actually go through my actual labor, of which by this time, you could imagine there is frantic nurses running around. I'm trying to ask questions. No one's answering my questions. And my body, because of a response to the trauma, my body begins to shake uncontrollably. And I just began to get really cold. And my husband is like, hey, something's wrong with her. And then I began to tell him, like, I can't breathe. Like, my throat is closing. I was like, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. And a nurse made a statement to the effect of, oh, this is just your body responding to your trauma. And then they brought in more nurses. And then my husband brought me some ice. And I was like, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. Come to find out, I was actually having an anaphylactic reaction to all of the medicine that they put me on to induce my labor. So it was like compounded on top of thing, compounded on top of thing. And eventually they took me off the medicine just in time before my throat completely closed up. And as soon as they took me off of the medicine, my water actually broke. And I was able to deliver my son, of which the doctor was not in the room, because we expressed to her that the water hadn't broken. She told me that my water had broken. I was like, this is, definitely my body. I just got through telling you all that I couldn't breathe. And you all were telling me that I was fine. So I think that I know what's going on with my body. And the doctor walked out of the room, and less than a minute of her walking out the room, my water broke and my son slipped out of me. And so that birthing experience was extremely traumatic. It was a lot for me to process. I'm still in a processing phase some days when I reflect on it. But it shaped so much of my identity in terms of what I'm able to carry, and my role and responsibility in terms of sharing my story for other women who may have experienced the same loss.
Absolutely, man. So what happened after your son came? What were the next steps of that process?
Yeah, so the next steps following my son actually being birthed was, at that moment, I think even for the nurses in the room, like, I think that the experience became a little bit more real because I felt a lot more empathy after I had actually given labor. They gave me my son to be able to hold him. They did have, which I have to admit was extremely helpful, they had a really great bereavement director at the hospital who came and, asked us if we wanted pictures, kind of, prayed with us, and just really kind of gave us she gave us herself, which was super important, because I felt seen and I felt heard, especially after having an experience where people were ignoring me. And so we were placed into another room, and we got to stay with our son for the next, I want to say 2 or 3 days. And we spent so much time just holding him and praying. And I am a Christian. I'm a believer of faith. And I believe in a relationship with Christ. And it was in the holding of my deceased son and kind of getting to a place of silence and feeling a little confined in the hospital room, that I began to really ask, like, God, like, yo, what are you doing? Like, I'm not actually with what you have decided. This is not what you informed me you were going to do. I was really, really, really frustrated and skeptical of my relationship with Christ and who I knew Christ to be. But I never forget my husband saying, you know, this too shall pass and we're going to grow from this. And because I'm such a curious person, in the middle, I wouldn't sleep at night. I would literally, while still in the hospital, I would look up stories about fertility and babies in the Bible. And it was crazy because, like, of course, my fleshly instinct was to completely, like, detach myself from my faith because it seemed like my faith didn't work out. But the thing is that my default, of which I feel like we always go back to a default when we experience trauma, my default was God. And so my default led me to still going to the Bible to try to figure this out, of which I was actually led to a book that had just come out. It was so ironic. I delivered on April 15th, and this book called Crushing by T.D. Jakes came out on April 16th. And I pre-ordered the book, and I remember that the book was delivered to the house on the same day that I was able to get out of the hospital. And that book just, man, when I tell you, like, there's one thing to, like, you can understand God on the surface level of the, you know, it feeling transactional, or we hear the stories about how God wants you to manifest fruit. But this book really shifted my perspective on, like, after God has helped you produce that fruit, like, what's the next level? And the next level of that is like an element of crushing that you may experience that produces not just more fruit, but it produces such an organic overflow that impacts even more people than just those in your immediate circle.
I love that. I absolutely love that. So I also wonder, you talked a lot about your relationship with Christ. So how did your relationship with your partner, your husband, take form and shape after that loss? You know, how did you all grieve together? How did you all heal together?
You know, ironically, it brought us so much closer together. So I'm in my 20s. We had actually, I want to say maybe 6 or 7 months prior to us finding out we were pregnant, we had gotten engaged. So we were still in, like, the engagement process, the wedding planning process. And I'm not going to lie, I was one of those millennial girls that had her checklist, and I was excited that, you know, some things were getting knocked off my checklist, to be totally honest. And this was not something that I had prepared for or ever thought that I would experience. And so it was one of those situations where I was like, I don't know how to deal with this. And God, you're going to have to help us both through this as partners. And I can say that our loss brought us together because we allowed each other the time and the space to heal individually, but we both stepped in to support one another. There was never a moment where I felt shame to be able to go to my husband and talk to him. One thing that was extremely healing for us, and we planned this on our own, was we actually took a trip. We went to Destin, Florida. We picked a random weekend, and we were like, we just need to get away. We booked a trip to Destin, Florida, got an Airbnb. We were on the beach, and we didn't have anything planned. We just knew we were going to Destin, Florida. I rented him his dream convertible. We drove down there in speed, and something that was really ironic was, of course, we were excited about this trip, excited to get away, excited to just have some time together to just, you know, celebrate one another. But I never forget, we were driving down and a storm came out of nowhere. And we're driving in the storm. And of course, I still have all this anxiety. It hadn't even been a month since the loss, to be totally honest with you. I had all this anxiety built up in me. And so this storm comes, and the storm, of course, to me, like spiritually symbolizes all the troubles and trauma that we just experienced in our lives. And the storm comes, and I swear to you, we got to literally what felt like the center of the storm. The car is shaking. I'm telling my husband, maybe we should stop. He was like, no, we're going to push through. He was like, we have a trip we're going to get to. We're going to get there. And he wasn't going to let anything stop him. And we drove through the thick of the storm. And when I got the chance to reflect on what that meant for he and I, it was like God telling us and showing us, I'm going to get you through all the storms that you guys are going to go through. And you guys are going to support one another in going through them. But you guys are going to have to do this together. And since then, we have open dialogue about our loss. I come to him when I have any anxiety or challenges. I'm very upfront with him when I just need a moment in space to just cry to myself and just kind of grieve and remember my son when I need to. We celebrated his birthday together this year, which was really, really beautiful for the both of us. And we decided actually to cremate our son. And so it was one of the most beautiful days outside of my wedding, actually. The day we went to spread his ashes, my husband picked this really beautiful waterfall here in Georgia, and we drove up to it. And I thought that was it. It was a really beautiful ceremony, just he and I, a quiet space for he and I to just reflect on, our son and what he has done for us and what we've learned thus far and just the hope that we have for the future. But my husband had planned an entire fun day. After that, we actually went to the Ponce City Market, and he had dinner reservations for us. And then we played all these games on this rooftop. And he just was so intentional about making sure that even in the moments of our despair and our loss, that these were going to be beautiful memories that we can also attach to our loss. So I'm very, very, very grateful for my husband. I'm very grateful for the way that he has shaped both of our grief journey.
Awesome. I would love for you to share with us any tools or any resources that you have used to help you on your healing journey. I know you mentioned the book by T.D. Jakes, Crushing. Any other books or things that you read?
Yes. So other books or things that I did. So one of the first things of which I had never done before, I'd never gone to therapy before. But this was definitely a moment where I was willing to, and I knew that I needed to talk to someone. So I actually went to, I believe it's Black Girl Therapists. They have a directory. Their directory. I went to Black Girl Therapy Directory.
Oh, the Therapy for Black Girls.
Therapy for Black Girls directory.
Directory.
Oh my
God.
Okay.
Awesome.
That completely changed my life. So I got a therapist her specialty was women who have experienced child loss. And that was the best thing that I could have ever done for myself. She also was our premarital counselor before we got married. That woman was so amazing. So I went to therapy actively. I also began engaging in breathe work practices with Black girls breathing. And that was super helpful for me because it helped me to really get in tune with my anxiety and kind of give me tools to kind of take hold of what I was going through. Another book that I read, that I reread and had a brand new perspective on was Wholeness by Torrey Roberts, which was extremely helpful for me to kind of accept and understand that this new identity that I was developing was actually a part of God's story and original purpose. And a couple of groups that I got to engage with that were so just kind and helpful and just really helped me to understand myself, see myself, and identify with other women who had experiences were fertility for colored girls. So I got to actually attend and engage with a local chapter, which was also just really great because there was just so much about child loss that, you know, myself at 28 years old, like I knew nothing about child loss. My understanding of fertility clearly was minimal. Like, I'll be honest, I thought that, you know, you have sex, you get pregnant, you have a baby, like that's how it works. And so they were very helpful in educating me, and helping me to learn how to craft my story. And then also the mourning moms. Katina Nish was such a beautiful person to embrace me and just kind of coach me through creating a vision for the life that I desired to live even after child loss.
Awesome. I love Reverend Stacy. She is a friend, and Katina. Yeah, I love Katina. She's amazing as well. So awesome. And they both were on the podcast. So I'll definitely link to their episodes on the show. So I would love to talk about what you are doing, because you have turned your pain into purpose and you have started Beauty for Ashes. So can you tell us about your blogging and the platform that you created?
Yes. So Beauty for Ashes is a platform that is specifically for angel parents of color who are millennials. So one thing that I, noticed in many of the meetings that I would attend was that I was, the youngest one in the room. And although, no woman ever made me feel like less than or like that my story mattered less because I was younger. However, there just weren't that many other millennial women in my particular age bracket who were comfortable standing up for what they, experienced. So Beauty for Ashes is about finding a way to trade in your ashes for the beauty of God. And so it is truly a community to connect, to create advocacy, and to also provide support. And even if that support is a listening ear. And so through blogging, through different Instagram live conversations that I've had with different women who've had those experiences, and just providing, like, again, an ear to say, hey, I hear you, I see you, and I understand what you're experiencing, and you won't have to experience this alone. And so it's growing. I'm not really sure what direction God is going to take it in. Last year, we actually had our first virtual healing conference, and I was able to successfully broadcast the conference from viewers who came all the way from the UK and even South Africa. One of our speakers was from South Africa last year. And that was a super healing experience because I got the chance to actually help women who knew that their story had power, but they didn't necessarily have the tools to craft it in a way that they could pitch themselves to become speakers on this particular topic. And so with the Virtual Healing Conference, it was also a place for where speakers could come and craft their story, hone their skills that they wanted to share with others. And then I actually created like a digital press kit for them to be able to package and share so that they can present their knowledge in other avenues and channels. And so I'm not sure if I'm going to do it this year. Just with everything going on, I'm not really, again, I'm still navigating where God is taking me, but I'm excited for what God is doing in my life and what he has allowed to actually be birthed from my loss.
Yes, and I love that. Yes. So take your time and come on back when you are ready to impact this community, because they are waiting and people need you. People need your voice. So I'm happy that you were able to do that with so many dynamic women. I love, and I think I probably interviewed most of all of them on the podcast.
I think
so, actually. Normally people do come across the podcast because I love that this platform allows people to share their stories in there, and then all of the amazing things that they're doing in the community. So I would love for you to just leave us some encouraging words to all the listeners who have gone through a traumatic birth experience or have experienced a second trimester miscarriage. What encouraging words can you leave with them, especially in this climate that we're in right now? We are going through this pandemic with COVID-19. We're all kind of quarantined and not really understanding not really knowing about the uncertainty that's going on. So what encouraging words can you leave with our listeners?
So the encouraging words that I would love to leave with listeners is that there is not a period in your story. And where you have placed a period, I want you to allow yourself to actually allow a colon or even a semicolon, because your loss is not the end of your story. It's not the end of your impact. And do not pitch your tent in pain. There is greater purpose in you, and there is something else beyond a child that is being birthed in you.
Well, there you have it, y'all. Y'all heard her. There is much more in you than that's being birthed. So I am so happy that we were able to connect and get you on this podcast to share your story, Dee. Thank you for sharing your story and your light with us. Where can the listeners connect with you after this episode?
The listeners can connect with me at beautyforashes_con. That's beautyforashes_con. Or if you want to get a little bit more personal with me, which I have no problem, you can also follow me at DAE_Hayes, HAYES. Both of those are active accounts on Instagram. Shoot us a message or comment on a photo. I am the one that manages those accounts, so you won't get some random person or be waiting on a response. I love connecting with people. I love praying for them. I just love being a listening ear and resource.
Awesome. Thank you so much again, Dee. And we will chat soon.
Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. For show notes and more information on today's guest, go to sistersinloss.com. If you have not joined our online community, go to sistersinloss.com as well as sign up for our newsletter. We want you to be a part of the community so you can know all of the events that we have planned on as Sisters in Loss. Go to sistersinloss.com, sign up for our newsletter, join our online community, and stay connected with us. Talk to you soon.